no matter how much I stretch, my flexibility is not improving. You ever ask yourself that? This is something, so years ago, this is something that one of my former students, shout out to JJ, he said one day when he walked in my doors, and we used to have this, a class on Tuesdays and Thursday mornings called the 10 Elements. And it was a dedicated class that I ran, like I mentioned, Tuesday, Thursday, like from 9 a.m. to 9:30. And every morning, JJ would come in about 15 minutes early, and he would stretch. Right. Next class, he'd come in again early the next day, and he would stretch. But I noticed each time when he came in to stretch, he was stuck in the same place, basically making zero progress. Right. And I asked him, like, how's that working for you? Come in every time, 10, 15 minutes early, kind of stretching, and nothing seems to be working. And that's when he told me, like, no matter how much I stretch, my flexibility is not improving. The next day, I'm stiff all over again, right? And I remember what he was asking me, like, what do you think? Any thoughts, like recommendations? He goes, why do you think that is? And I just remember telling him, it's all in your head. And he kind of gave me this frustrated look, like, seriously? Like, what do you mean it's all in my head, right? So just to help you understand and explain what was happening with JJ, I want you to think of, so hold on, let me back up. So right around like 2002, I bought my first computer. Okay, so just bear with me here. Bought a computer. 2002 was a big old desktop. I think it was like a Hewlett Packard. And I'll never forget the day, right? I started getting all these pop-ups. I started on the computer. I just started getting like on the internet, and the computer would freeze up, right? I'd have to restart it. And then once I restarted it, it was back to normal, but it was only a matter of time before it kind of repeated that process, right? I took the computer to a place here in Corpus called, it's probably nationwide. It's called Geek Squad. They work inside of like a Best Buy. Anyway, the guy at the counter told me, he's like, yeah, man, your PC, it's got a Trojan virus. This is very common. You doesn't look like you had any antivirus protection, and it basically got infected, and we got to completely, redo everything. So then he asked me, like, do you want to buy this antivirus software? We'll clean it up, and then, we can give you this antivirus thing to prevent future attacks. And I remember declining because the repairs in and of themselves, like, pretty much broke my bank account. Like, I was just getting on my feet as a young 20-year-old. And I told him I'd come. I was like, you know what? I'll come back. Like, 2002, I just started my first business. And, funds were not that great, right? I was still in the building process. So I was like, look, man, I'll come back on my next payday. And I tell you what, man, as sure as the sky is blue, the virus came back after a few days of just getting on the internet, right? And you see, that's the reason JJ wasn't seeing progress with his stretching. He didn't know how to install antivirus software, right? And so there's this concept. There's this thing that I call movement viruses. And movement viruses come in many different forms. Okay? An injury, poor posture, lack of activity, repetitive movements, sitting for hours a day, right? Foam rolling, lacrosse bar work, and stretching, right, are like removing the movement virus, the movement virus, right? So if you've got an prior injury, that will lead to compensations, right? Poor posture leads to compensations. This is what I call movement viruses. And so whenever you do stretching, whenever you do foam rolling, anything like that, that's like removing the virus. But the only problem is it's a temporary fix, right? It's that window of opportunity to make a lasting change. But if you don't reinstall antivirus software, the viruses come back, right? Only they come back with vengeance. So this is why traditional stretching, foam rolling, quote unquote movement prep doesn't work long term. Like I mentioned, I'm not a big fan of warming up and doing like a lot of movement prep, right? I take care of my body. I go through very specific movement sequences. And right here, I'm actually doing one of them. I was working on getting my abs lit up, and my freaking abs cramped big time. So anywho, if you don't install antivirus software, like all these viruses start to come back, right? And that was the light bulb moment for JJ when he realized, like, okay, that makes a lot of sense, right? Especially when I exposed him. So I've got this 3-step antivirus protocol that I take my students through. And when I expose him to step 1, which is static motor control, you've probably seen these fancy like balance contraptions out there, right? Like Bosu balls, stability balls, like even single leg exercises. Well, like these promote an environment for stability. The only problem where they fall apart is they're mostly focused on like survival. Like if you're trying to balance on like a Bosu ball, instead of reinforcing movement corrections like reflexively, it can put you in a state of like survival, right? And plus, like a Bosu ball or stability ball would not have been a good option for JJ because he had some really like gnarly ankle and hip issues, like for many years. So those tools are like out of the question. And for most people, they're out of the question, right? So we had to back up a few steps to the lowest forms of stability and static motor control, right? We've incorporated some kettlebell specific static motor control movements, right? For his shoulders, hips, and his knees were really weak as well. Everything was just really tight. And once we did all that, not only did we notice no longer did we notice he no longer needed to stretch when he came in early. And it was about the 6-week point. He said, man, he shot me a message about this, or an email about it. He's like, man, I remember it was about the 6-week point I started noticing like my aches and pains were going away. And after 12 weeks, I couldn't even remember what aches and pains felt like. And this is a guy that dealt with pain his whole entire life. Very active, collegiate, athlete, and just a lot of wear and tear on his body. And he's like, man, after 12 weeks of going through this, what became our 3-step antivirus protocol, he was like, man, I don't even remember what the pain felt like, right? And then after that, we put together a specific like developmental sequence to make sure his movement viruses stayed away and his newfound mobility, flexibility stuck, right? And so the end result for JJ was no more endless stretching. Right? Now he could focus on the cool stuff, right? Going out for a run, swinging, snatching kettlebells, which we got him to swinging kettlebells, didn't bother him. Still had some ankle stuff. It just, he's had, several things kind of going on with his ankle, but he was hanging from pull-up bar. And that's one of the big things that's really missing from our strength training nowadays is hanging from things, like hanging from a tree, hanging from a pull-up bar, monkey bars, jungle gyms, those kind of things. Those are things that are really missing. And those things, the absence of those can lead to movement viruses, right? It leads to weakness, and then viruses kind of creep in, right? He even got to a point to where he started barbell deadlifting for a little bit, right, without injuring his back. Again, still put a lot of pressure on his ankles, so we kind of had to push those to the side, but he was able to do this stuff without injury. Prior to, he was like, man, if I would have deadlifted that barbell or if I would have swung that kettlebell before, like I would have been out for weeks. So now JJ's out traveling the world, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And that's essentially why he came to me, was like, look, man, I want to be able to travel. I want to be able to do these things, and I don't want to be broken. And normally when I do these things, I kind of push myself, it's like I break. And he's like, after working with you, he worked with me for, I think, about a year. He's like, that whole entire year, he's like, that's the best shape I've ever been. Never been in any pain. I've never been pain-free for so long. And he even I think he even dropped like 10 pounds over the course of that process, right? Without focusing on fat loss, right? And like all we did was we addressed the cracks in his foundation. Okay, we identified those movement viruses, we removed the new movement viruses, and we installed antivirus software with what I call a 3-part antivirus protocol, which I'll get more into in other lessons. So anyway, the reason why I'm telling you all this is that's kind of what I'm working on today. Is you see me going through like hollow rocks when my abs freaking cramped up. I'm doing like hanging leg raise regressions. And the reason why I'm doing these is to try to just fill in those gaps. Like I just had a feeling that, you know what, I need to be paying more attention to my abs, which is why the last several episodes you see me going through the specific setup where you're making sure that I'm maintaining connection, I'm maintaining that integrity, and I'm just really trying to fight through that. And sometimes I have a hard time maintaining that connection, right? If you've got a weak grip, weak glutes, weak abs, and when I say abs, I'm not talking about the abs that you can see. I'm talking about those deep core spinal stabilizer muscles, right? Those muscles that are the ones that keep viruses from coming back, okay? And I just see so many times, like just over and over, I see as I look back and I'm looking, I mean, even today, so many people are doing their strength training like literally backwards, right? Literally backwards. And so, especially like when it comes to strength training with kettlebells, it's just always kind of funny. Anytime I come across someone's like, yeah, I've got experience. I know how to do, I've been using kettlebells for a while. Like, it's like, okay, well, let's take a look. You know, usually we always find something, right? But if you've been in the kettlebell space for any length of time, you're familiar with swings and get-ups. I'm a big proponent of swings and get-ups. But, you know, maybe you've had a bad experience with kettlebells, right? Which is not uncommon. You know, maybe you hurt your back, right? Maybe you tweak something. Or maybe, just maybe, your swings lack that crisp punch, right? And if they do, if you've ever injured your back, if you've tweaked something, if your swings don't feel crisp, here's why. You've structured your kettlebell training using the wrong progression. You've literally done everything backwards, right? And here's the thing, it's not your fault if that's the case. Because I'm sure during your first kettlebell session, someone had you swinging a kettlebell on the first day. And likely snatching by the end of the month. Right? Now, if you're an athlete, like this probably shouldn't be a problem, right? Probably catch on pretty quick. And again, that's kind of what I'm doing today, just really drilling and working on the technical. So this is a technical day. Today's a technical day. So I'm really working on filling in those gaps, working on taming the arc, working on core, hitting the abs, right? So if you're an athlete, a lot of these progressions will come pretty quick. But if you've been working a desk job for the last 10 years, right, that's likely the reason why swings have been leaving you with a sore back, or they're not as crisp, right? So there's this framework called the OPT model, Optimum Performance Training Model, right? And this is where a lot of my programming in terms of like organization of the training, not so much like the volume, reps, and sets, but like the organization of the training is based on this OPT model, right? And there's 5 stages, right? 5 phases, right? So you've got phase 1 is, and the strength block makes up the main component. But the first phase is stabilization, right? Stabilization, endurance. So this is where you'd work on like stability, you know, a static motor control, dynamic motor control. Like this is where you'd work on those things. Then you got, you know, phase 2, and that's your strength endurance, right? Trying to do these things for a longer period of time, right? Then you've got hypertrophy, then you've got maximal strength, and then you've got power, okay? And so swings and other ballistic exercises represent the top of the pyramid, right? The power. And as I said, you've been learning, more than likely, kettlebells completely backwards. I know this because as a rookie coach, over a decade ago, I taught it backwards because I didn't know any better. Maybe you learn, you know, again, this is probably what this is like a mock session, what may have looked like. Maybe you learned how to pattern the hip hinge for a few reps. Then you quickly progressed, you know, maybe you did a couple of deadlifts, and then you quickly progress to the 2-hand swing. And then after that, heavier 2-handed swings, then double kettlebell swings, right? Max power type stuff. Eventually strength endurance training, anti-rotational training with like 1-arm swings. And I'm willing to bet my next iPhone, you were snatching by the end of the month. Backwards. See what I mean? Doing all the training backwards. Not something a desk jockey, an average Joe, should be jumping on in his first 30 days. I mean, you could, but it's not going to turn out well for you, right? Even if you're an experienced kettlebeller. What you need to do is establish a solid foundation of strength, stability, mobility, and strength endurance before you even think about power training. And I get messages, I get emails and messages like this all the time. Man, I just got into kettlebells and I've already hurt my back. I saw this other one on a Facebook group forum, and it's like, man, I've hurt my back. I've done all these drills. I've done all the cues. Like, I've done everything, but yet I'm still hurting my back. It's because they're doing everything backwards, right? So you can see this guy. Has anyone experienced with lower back pain after doing kettlebell swings and get-ups? I've done the mobility. I've done the world's greatest stretch, followed by some activation drills. Like, he's doing everything, but yet still injuries. And 26 comments later, like, there were like 26 plus comments by the time I checked it, each with their own quote unquote correction to improve his technique, when in reality, there isn't a technical cue or correction that you can do to remove the movement virus if there's a movement virus present. Not even the quote unquote world's greatest stretch, like whatever the heck that is. And just remember what I said about stretching and how frustrated it made JJ. It only treats the symptom and doesn't get to the root cause. It's a window of opportunity to reinstall antivirus software. Right? In the images I showed, prove my case on why stretching alone is futile. And then eventually somebody jumped in finally with the best answer above, and it was, stop doing swings until you've been assessed. Bingo, right? That was it. And so, yeah, I mean, the reason why I share this with you is if you're new to kettlebells, strength training, like, you should not be rushing straight to swings, snatches. Like, if someone has you snatching a kettlebell in the first 30 days of you learning how to use a kettlebell, just be very cautious, right? Especially if you're new to it, especially if are just now getting into shape. Especially if you've been working a desk job for, however many years. So that's what we're working on, some really cool, some new curriculums around this kind of stuff here at the gym. Really dialing in that foundation, really just surfing that pyramid, that performance pyramid. And it's been a game changer for the guys in our programs, for the students here at Hardstyle. And yeah, man, more than likely, you've been learning how to use kettlebells backwards. And if you've got movement viruses, if you're getting nagging aches and pains in your strength training, and you're doing all the drills, and you've read all the books, and you've been on all the forums, and yet you're still experiencing little aches and pains, the lower back is sore after swings, I'm willing to bet my next iPhone you've got movement viruses. And that's what our three-step antivirus protocol is all about. And I'll get more into that, what that is, and if you'd be interested in knowing more about that in another episode. But I just wanted to bring that up because that's kind of what my session was about today, filling in those kinks, working on those weaknesses. For me, you can see I really struggled with that hanging leg raise regression, especially when I went both legs out. I haven't done that in a long time. It's definitely a weak point for me. So it's something I'm going to be working on technical days. I'm actually taking up learning the hook grip, which is like learning a new language. That's been pretty interesting. My thumbs hate me. So I'm using hook grip on my light weights. And then I'm using the straps for my heavier weights, because I've noticed that with a double overhand grip, I can get in a killer wedge position. I mean, look at that wedge. It's just like I can get almost a completely vertical and the pull is straight. And I'm going to tease already. In one of my recent sessions, I discovered an invisible technique. I was playing around towards the end of one of my sessions on one of my drop sets, and I started doing a very specific thing. And so now what I've discovered is there's a fifth part to the wedge. I remember I mentioned on a lesson a couple videos ago the lifter's wedge and how there's 4 components. Well, now I believe there's 5 components. I believe I've uncovered a new gem, and this is an absolute game changer. My session yesterday and my session today, which is not the one I'm videoing, I'm 100% convinced I've stumbled upon something very interesting. I've never heard anybody mention this because it's nuanced, it's invisible. And once I reveal it, I'll put together, a little something for you, maybe to reveal it, or maybe I'll just leave it for the next level deadlift coaching program that we're putting together. I don't know. I haven't decided. Anyway, the result is I had a personal best with just wedge position. I had a personal best just with the wedge position where I broke the floor with 465. That's the most I've ever done. I broke the floor. I literally got the weights to hover, held it for a 1 count, and then it was probably the fastest I'd ever pulled 465, as you can see there. And so it was just mind-blowing. Anywho, I'm kind of rambling, kind of going on and on. That's all I got for you, man. If you're experiencing little nagging aches and pains, back is sore after doing deadlifts or swings or whatever, there aren't any cues. There aren't any progressions or anything that you can do in your strength training that's going to help resolve that. More than likely, you've got movement viruses, and there's a very specific 3-step protocol that you'll need to go through to remove the virus and then install antivirus software. And that's the exact kind of thing that we take our students through at Hardstyle and the guys in our online coaching programs. If you want to know more about that kind of stuff, drop a comment below, and I'd be happy to fill you in on what some of that stuff might look like, or what it might look like if you decide if you want to work with us and learn what that protocol would be like. So that's all I got, man. If you're enjoying the videos, if you're wanting to take your deadlift to the next level, check out our playbook. Check out our deadlift playbook, and I'll drop everything in the description area. Appreciate you watching. Peace.